Good morning, everybody, and welcome into a new episode of Capitol View, a webcast brought to you by the Daily Journal and djournal.com, covering state politics with Bobby Harrison, our Capitol Bureau Chief down in Jackson. I'm Brad Locke, joined today also by Chris Kiefer, our digital. Wait, what's your title again? It's so long I can't remember it.
Multimedia guy. How about that?
Multimedia guy. There
That'll
you
work.
go. Former education reporter. So Chris knows of what he speaks when it comes to today's topic, which is mainly going to be EdBuild and the funding formula plan it presented Monday down in Jackson. And that's one of the reasons that we did not have this webcast yesterday, because that was going on right about the time Capitol View would have started. Plus, I was sick. Still a little bit sick, but hopefully I won't go into a coughing fit here. And if I do,
that's why I'm here.
That's why Chris is here. Take over in case that happens. How you doing down there, Bobby?
All right. How y'all doing? I thought Chris's title, he told me his title was King of the Internet.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I want that title.
Yeah, well, that's actually me, since I'm the online editor. I'm the king of the internet.
Oh, pardon me, Brad.
He's the king of video and multimedia stuff.
Podcast, webcast.
It does kind of mesh together at some point. Anyway, Bobby's the king of the state legislature. Basically. Okay. Well, Bobby, we want to spend most of today's program talking about this plan, these recommendations, the rewrite, whatever you want to call it. EdBuild, of course, as we've mentioned many times, we've discussed it before. Based out of New Jersey, they were hired by legislative leaders to help rewrite the education funding formula. Of course, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program that was passed back in 1997, and it hasn't been working. And I mean, it also hasn't been fully funded, and that's the main reason some people think it's not working. Like Hob Bryan, the Democrat from Amory, he and others contend that it's not working because it's not getting funded. But the Republican leadership has decided to rewrite the formula. And Bobby, after all was said and done yesterday down there, do we have a bunch of answers or still more questions?
Yeah, we got a bunch of questions, and the proposal, the recommendations made by EdBuild, and they were pointed out these are strictly recommendations, which it's up to the legislature to decide what the formula will look like in the final at the end of the day. But the proposal that EdBuild made, if there was complaints that the Adequate Education Program, the current funding formula, was complicated, then those complaints should be doubled, because the formula, the recommendations that were made yesterday make for a very confusing, a very complex formula that is going to be hard for people to wrap their hands around. But we'll see what the legislature does with it. It's being placed in a bill, the recommendations, and it'll be taken up in the normal process during this session through the House and Senate Education Committees, probably Appropriations Committee, and ultimately to the floors of both chambers.
As you mentioned in the top of the story, one of the proposals is to spend 20% more to educate poor students, and so school districts could receive additional money for educating special needs students, students for whom English is a second language. And that's just kind of the beginning of where the funding formula gets complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, the current formula provides 5% more for each student on the free free lunch program. When it was passed in '97, the architects of the MAEP, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program, opted to use that as the sort of the indicator of poverty, and most everybody agrees that it takes, generally speaking, more money to educate a child living in poverty than it does a child from a more affluent family. And what the EdBuild proposal does, it takes it increases that to essentially 25%, but it would remove the recommendation of EdBuild is remove the free lunch program as the indicator, and go to the census track, and use that as people. I think what is proposed is kids living below the poverty line of 100% would school districts would get 20% extra for them, 25% total, but 5% is already being paid, so 20% extra. And that's, and EdBuild's proposal is built around providing additional money for, kids who are, kids that don't speak English as their first language. They would, we get more money for them. Special needs kids, you get more money from them, which does, the school district do already, but it would be incorporated into the formula. Right now, it's not incorporated into the formula. There'd be more money for technology. There'd just be a whole litany of items that there'd be more money for. And so
gifted students would get more money too. Is that right? I thought that was
Pardon me?
interesting. I said, if I saw right, gifted students would also get more money. Is that correct?
Well, they do under the current formula too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another big question among many here, Bobby, is if will local school districts have to contribute more than they're currently contributing? I think that's one of the possible big hangups there some people might have with this.
Yeah, I think the school districts that might end up contributing more, though, would actually be the more affluent school districts, the property-rich school districts,
Okay.
which
Okay.
a lot of people think that's the way to go. But, when legislators get down to, especially the Republican majority gets down to passing this and realizing the school districts they represent would be the ones that might be paying more towards the formula, that might cause a little heartburn. We'll just have to wait and see.
Bobby, would that come with, obviously right now when you talk about districts paying more, I could speak for the Tupelo district particularly. They're at their cap. They can't raise property taxes to get more money. Is there talk about changing the cap on how much property tax school districts can levy?
Yeah, that was one of the recommendations, that in certain circumstances that school districts be allowed to go over that cap, which is it 55 meals now, Chris?
Right.
Yeah. So that might be part of the recommendations. And Brad, it might be important to, right now the way the MAP works is you take C-level, you take officially run C-level districts, you calculate how much it costs to run those districts in the area of education, administration, ancillary,
ancillary.
Yeah, I couldn't say that word off, but and maintenance, and school districts are supposed to get that amount of money, with the local school districts required to pay no more than 27% of that amount, and then the state would make up the rest. Now, what is proposed by EdBuild is to take several factors, factor in how much it costs to pay a teacher, and multiply that times, I think the national average is 16 students in the classroom. So multiply that by 16 students, and then do something on administration and factor all those things together. And there's a lot of leeway. The question is, will MAEP produce more money for the local school districts or this EdBuild proposal? And it really just depends on where the legislature comes down. The legislature could make some changes here and there and provide more than MAEP is currently providing, or they can make some changes around the edges and provide less than MAP is currently providing. It's just a matter of how the legislature comes down. So it's not, you can't right now everybody wanted to make a comparison yesterday to say, does MAP provide more now, or will the EdBuild proposal provide more if enacted? And you can't make that proposal, but you can't make that comparison yet. But what you can say is, MAP hadn't been fully funded since 2008. Only been fully funded twice since it's been enacted. So to assume that if the EdBuild proposal costs more money, that the legislature is going to do that is I think rather naive.
And then we get into the whole numbers game. Rebecca Sibilia, CEO of EdBuild, she spoke at this joint hearing of the House and Senate Education and Appropriations Committees, and she said that her recommendation would result in between about $4,700 and $5,200 in state and local funds per student. The current formula, she says, produces about $4,600, slightly under $4,700 per student. But then John Moore of Brandon said the true amount is closer to $5,200. So, and then you got the whole inflation factor, and with that numbers change as inflation increases.
Yeah, and the EdBuild recommendation, best I could tell, did not have an inflation factor built into it. So that's something that I'm sure there'll be a lot of concerns about, and there'll be those advocating, if the legislature does pass it, to include some type of inflation factor into in the formula.
Bobby, you mentioned that there's still a lot of questions about it. I know you've written before about the MAEP process and kind of taking place over a couple of years. I mean, I guess the expectation still is that the legislature is going to try to do it this session. Is there still concern that's too rushed to really understand the details of it, or kind of what is the sentiment on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on who you talk to. The people who
right.
The leadership. This is being pushed by House Speaker Philip Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, who presides over the Senate. And, their goal is to do it this year. And they say that, you can do it through the legislative process this year. And John Moore even you mentioned, Brad, you referenced him a while ago. He's the House Education Committee chair. He talked about yesterday that if they're not quite finished with it, the governor could call a special session so they could finish it. Or, they also had the option to extend the session to finish it if they're not finished with it. But no, it's a big undertaking to try to achieve in one legislative session, which is EdBuild didn't even start working on this until sometimes in October. So it's being really impacted time frame compared to how long it took to do MAEP back in '97. I think it began like in '94, '95, and culminated with the passage in '97.
And Hob Bryan, the Democrat from Emory, was one of the main architects of that MAEP formula, Bobby. And actually, he took some action yesterday. I don't know if it was just merely symbolic because he got shot down pretty quick, but he tried to pass a resolution on the Senate floor that any new formula could not provide any less funding than the current formula we have now, and that was blocked by the legislative leadership.
Right. That was, that Hob Bryan is sort of a master at, pulling out those things and trying to make symbolic, but also real points. And that was another attempt yesterday. The important, I think the thing that's being lost in this is MAP has a word, that the legislature shall fully fund it. That 5-letter word, SHALL, has caused a lot of consternation in the legislative process because, you had education advocates saying, the law says it shall be fully funded, and the legislative leadership has said, well, or some of the legislative leadership has argued through the years, well, we can't fully fund it, and they hadn't fully funded it. And I think that, with whatever formulas is agreed to, I bet you that 5-letter word's not going to be included in the package, that it shall be fully funded. The Governor Phil Bryant has already weighed in on this, and he's opposed to any formula that mandates that the legislature spend a set amount of money. Now that's kind of, I thought that was kind of the point of a formula, but
right.
Yeah, but so we'll see how that goes in the process. But it may not be so much what the formula says as more so the legislative intent. And I think that part of what they're doing with this is trying to remove that 5-letter word, and they're going around the world to do it. But that's where we are right now.
I wonder too how much I don't know if resentment's the right word or just concern, but that the legislative leaders went to a New Jersey-based company to do this. And I don't know how many such companies there are out there, or if it was hiring. But I guess maybe some people think maybe that wasn't even necessary. And again, we got people arguing that just we need to fully fund what we've got. I mean, how much tension is there over that right now? Even though there's a super majority of Republicans, maybe it's not that much.
Well, and it should be pointed out that in the '90s that it was Chris, you may remember her name. It was a Colorado-based company, a Denver-based company that worked on I forget Jerry Augenblick was one of the ones who was involved. Augenblick, and I can't remember the name of the firm, but they worked on the Mississippi Adequate Education Program in the '90s, so that's not unusual. And some would argue that EdBuild is sort of a new player, if you will, in this whole education funding issue. So whereas the Augenblick firm was well established and it was known probably more so than EdBuild. But if you look at the EdBuild website, they have support from some major donors who are believed to be have public education as their as a top interest, including Bill and Melinda Gates and some folks like that are donors to EdBuild. So they do have some bona fides, if you will.
You mentioned Governor Bryant earlier, and he's going to give his State of the State address tonight at 5:30. I believe you can watch it and listen to it on MPB. Do you feel like do you think he's going to address this education funding issue, and what other kind of main points do you think he's going to tackle tonight?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, he's already said that he, doesn't want a formula that mandates the legislature spend a set amount of money, but he has generally been supportive of rewriting the formula, and he's been one of those through the years that's been criticized for his opposition to fully funding the current formula. So yeah, I'm sure he'll address that tonight. He'll probably talk about state revenues, which are continue to be a problem for the state, and talk about other aspects of his legislative agenda. And I think his main theme is that I'm guessing will be that over the past few years, the state's been spending too much money, so they gotta cut spending even more. So we'll see about that.
All right, well, that's good stuff, Bobby. Again, this whole EdBuild formula, we just have to wait and see what happens next. If they do try to push something through with the normal legislative process, that would start in the education committees. But if you want more on this, Bobby is going to be on the Memo podcast tomorrow. It's Wednesday. Usually they'll drop in the mid to late afternoon. And Bobby, and I believe Emma Kent is going to be joining us, Chris, education reporter. So we'll kind of go maybe even a little deeper into this whole situation with education funding and EdBuild with Bobby tomorrow on the Memo. You can listen to that in iTunes, your podcast apps, or at memo.djournal.com. And that's it for this edition of Capitol View. And I do thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you to Chris for helping out. You're much smarter about these things than I am. And of course, as always, Bobby, thank you for your insight and commentary and analysis down there in Jackson. And we'll see you, I guess, tomorrow on the Memo. And next week, we'll be back hopefully on Monday, our regularly scheduled.
You getting feeling better, Brad?
I'm getting there, Bobby. They got me all doped up on all kinds of stuff here. So that's it. We'll be back hopefully next Monday about 2 o'clock live at djournal.com. If you miss it, just watch the replay later in the day there at the website. So until next time, I'm Brad Locke for Chris Kiefer and Bobby Harrison. Y'all have a good week.
Thank you.